Picture an endless, suffocating forest. A dark, completely isolated wasteland where the mist never really lifts and the twisted, creeping branches hide secrets that the modern world has totally forgotten. Seriously, you might want to turn off the lights for this one, because in today's explainer, we are diving deep into the absolute most terrifying, longest-running legend of the Garden State. We're talking about a creature that has stalked the shadows of North America for nearly 300 years, leaving behind this bizarre trail of blood, mass hysteria, and just paralyzing terror. And look, we aren't talking about your run-of-the-mill spooky campfire ghost story here. No, we're talking about a literal abomination that mobilized actual police forces, completely shut down factories, and terrified millions of people. So buckle up, because today we're going to completely gut this legend and uncover what really hides behind the Jersey Devil.
So to really wrap our heads around this horror, we actually have to travel all the way back to a brutal, violently stormy night in the year 1735. Imagine a tiny, completely isolated cabin out in Leeds Point. Mother Leeds, who is exhausted, frustrated, and just writhing in the sheer agony of her 13th pregnancy, finally reaches her absolute breaking point. She's surrounded by friends and midwives in this deeply, deeply superstitious era. And just as a massive crack of thunder shakes the very foundation of the house, she hurls a curse into the air. Looking down at her swollen belly, she screams, "Let it be the devil." And well, as the legend goes, the darkness actually answered her plea.
Part 1. The Origin of Evil, a Nightmare Creature. Okay, let's dive into this, because the birthplace of this myth is honestly just as hostile and terrifying as the monster itself. Picture the Pine Barrens. 1.1 million acres of stunted pitch pines, sandy, barren soil, and these murky, pitch-black cedar swamps. It's a vast, desolate, and just eerily silent landscape that somehow takes up over 20% of New Jersey. The native Lenni Lenape tribes already knew this place was bad news. They called the region Papukesing, which literally translates to Place of the Dragon. It is this natural, completely impenetrable maze, basically the absolute perfect hiding spot to incubate a living nightmare. And that exact nightmare was supposedly born on that stormy night in 1735. Now at first, Mother Leeds' 13th child looked perfectly normal, but right before the horrified eyes of the midwives in that cramped cabin, it began to mutate. Imagine being in that room. The baby's fleshy body rapidly stretched into this grotesque reptilian shape. An elongated, horse-like head literally erupted from its neck. Massive leathery bat wings burst right out of its back. Its feet violently split into cloven hooves, and a thrashing forked tail grew behind it. Letting out a blood-curdling scream, the beast battered the midwives, thrashed its own family, and shot straight up the chimney into the raging storm. And it didn't just disappear. For centuries to come, massive historical figures like Commodore Stephen Decatur and even Napoleon's own brother, Joseph Bonaparte, would claim to fire their weapons directly at this winged cryptid in the woods without leaving so much as a single scratch.
Part 2. The 1909 Hysteria, a Week of Terror.
Now, if you thought this madness stayed neatly tucked away in the 18th century, think again. Fast forward to the 20th century, where this urban legend actually explodes into a real-life, frankly terrifying public crisis. We are entering what historians officially call the Phenomenal Week. Starting on January 16, 1909, sightings just multiplied like a plague. First, the monster was spotted flying high over Woodbury. The very next day, these totally impossible hoofprints appeared in the fresh snow. Tracks that went over the tops of roofs, slipped under unbroken fences, and then just vanished into thin air in the middle of open fields. By January 20th, terror gripped the region so tightly that heavily armed posses were forming in Haddonfield just to hunt this demon down. And the madness truly peaked on January 21st when the creature reportedly attacked a trolley car completely full of passengers and laid siege to a social club down in Camden, literally forcing the police to open fire into the shadows.
And the real-world consequences of this week were just staggering. We are talking about genuine society-halting panic. It was so intense that schools bolted their doors shut. Factory workers flat out refused to leave their homes, and entire streets sat completely empty, patrolled only by nervous armed citizens. It got so crazy that the Philadelphia Zoo even stepped in and offered a massive $10,000 reward for the beast's live capture. Naturally, that kind of money brought out the grifters. Get this, a publicist named Norman Jeffries actually glued fake wings and painted green stripes onto a literal kangaroo, just to exhibit it in a museum and try to claim the reward money. You can't make this stuff up. It was a week of just absolute unhinged madness.
So, the crucial point is this. How in the world did we get from a witch's curse in a tiny 1735 cabin to a multi-state mass panic in 1909? Are we actually dealing with a terrifying, undocumented biological anomaly out in the swamps? Or are we looking at one of the most wildly successful, enduring political smear campaigns in all of American colonial history? Let's take a hard pivot right here. We're going to leave the monster hunters behind and take a look at the cold, hard facts.
Part 3. Gunning the legend, the truth behind the myth. It is time to truly gut this legend. Let's put on our historian hats for a second and dissect this myth layer by layer. The very first stop in our investigation has to be biology. Many experts point to a totally logical, real-world explanation for these terrifying physical sightings, and it's called the sandhill crane. Now, we are talking about a massive, intimidating bird. It stands 4 feet tall with a staggering 5-foot wingspan. And not only does it look strange and almost prehistoric, but it lets out this guttural, blood-curdling whoop that will absolutely chill you to the bone if you hear it in the dark. Think about it. If one of these giant birds gets blown off its regular migratory path into the murky, foggy New Jersey swamps, a terrified farmer in the middle of the night could easily mistake it for a 2-legged winged demon.
Part 4. Colonial Politics, the Real Leeds Family.
But as much sense as that makes, a lost bird doesn't exactly explain 3 solid centuries of hyper-specific, highly targeted folklore. To find the true origin of the devil turd, we have to look away from the swamps and look directly at 18th century political intrigue, religious infighting, and some seriously toxic gossip. Because here's the thing, Daniel and Titan Leeds weren't some ghostly inventions for a campfire story. They were real, flesh-and-blood people who became the victims of what might be the most brutal PR sabotage in history. Notice the deep societal divide going on at the time. Daniel Leeds was a prominent surveyor and publisher living in a community entirely dominated by strict Quaker orthodoxy. And Leeds, well, he started publishing almanacs that featured astrology and pagan symbolism. To the Quakers, this was absolute heresy. To make matters even worse, Daniel openly allied himself with the deeply hated British royal governor. This double whammy of political and religious betrayal caused his former Quaker brothers to formally brand him Satan's harbinger, explicitly accusing his entire family of practicing the occult. We aren't taking any sides here politically or religiously, but objectively speaking, his rivals brilliantly and successfully weaponized their religious platform to literally demonize him.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly how simple symbolism can be turned into a deadly weapon. When Daniel's son Titan Leeds took over the family publishing business, he started proudly printing the Leeds family crest right on the cover of their publications. And what mythological creature was sitting right there on that crest? A wyvern, a winged, 2-legged dragon with a barbed tail and a horrifying beastly head. His political enemies took one look at this crest, combined it with their ongoing accusations of heresy and Satanism, and literally just began referring to the Leeds family as actual monsters. The political metaphor was physically manifesting right before their eyes. They practically handed their enemies the monster design on a silver platter.
Part 5. Franklin's Joke, the Almanac War.
Now, even with all that drama, this legend might have just quietly faded into obscure history if it weren't for the intervention of a massive American heavyweight. A young, brilliant, and, let's be honest, highly sarcastic individual who accidentally poured a giant tank of gasoline onto the monster myth. I'm talking about Benjamin Franklin himself. Back in the 1730s, the almanac publishing business was fiercely, ruthlessly competitive. Think of it as the internet of its day. Titan Leeds was the undisputed market leader with his Leeds Almanac. Meanwhile, Benjamin Franklin had just launched his Poor Richard's Almanac, and he desperately needed a way to steal Titan's massive readership. So Franklin resorted to what we today would instantly recognize as an absolutely epic, viral marketing troll job.
Franklin's tactic was just ruthless. Okay, step 1. Franklin uses the completely fake astrology in his own almanac to jokingly but publicly predict the exact date and time of Titan Leeds' imminent death. Step 2. The date arrives, Titan obviously survives, completely perfectly healthy, and he furiously publishes a retort calling Franklin a liar and a fool. But then comes step 3, the knockout punch. Franklin, with pure, unadulterated satirical genius, responds in print by claiming that the real Titan was far too polite of a gentleman to ever use such foul language. Therefore, the man currently writing the Leeds Almanac must be a ghost resurrected from the grave, or perhaps a demon from hell. This brutal, hilarious prank permanently hardwired the Leeds name to ghosts, monsters, and the occult in the public imagination forever.
Part 6. The Real Monster, an Immortal Myth.
So when you combine Quaker heresy, a dragon on a family crest, and Benjamin Franklin's relentless mocking satire, the Leeds Devil, which we now know as the Jersey Devil, was officially born. As historian Brian Regal so masterfully summarizes on this exact point, quote, "The Jersey Devil was never a genuine creature, but a political animal, a scapegoat, birthed from the pages of forgotten texts and the shattered reputation of a family," end quote. The monster that utterly terrified the East Coast wasn't some biological nightmare lurking in the swamps. It was essentially 18th century fake news that just spiraled spectacularly and wildly out of control.
Yet somehow that exact smear campaign gifted pop culture an absolutely indestructible icon. The Jersey Devil evolved from a targeted religious insult into the legendary inspiration for countless horror movies, classic terrifying episodes of The X-Files, and even, get this, in 1982, following a massive fan vote, it actually became the namesake for a National Hockey League franchise, the New Jersey Devils. The monster wasn't just embraced, it was literally merchandised.
Which honestly leaves us with one final truly mind-blowing thought to chew on. If an inside political joke and some petty editorial gossip from 300 years ago could literally mutate into a bat-winged creature that shut down schools and terrified millions of people, what other nightmare legends, the kind that still keep you up at night, are actually nothing more than centuries of disguised, weaponized rumors? The next time you're walking in the woods and you hear a branch snap in the pitch dark, you really have to ask yourself, are you actually afraid of a monster? Or are you just terrified by the immense, enduring power of a story well told? Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. Stay curious out there and always keep questioning what hides in the shadows.